It's always that, but
Good evening and welcome to the March 22nd special meeting of the Queensbury Unit 3 School District Board of Education. If you'd all rise and join me with a pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those of you that are online, thank you for joining us. Just as a touch of house cleaning. In the past, we have had the habit of taking our masks off when we speak, try to be a little more clear talking to the microphones. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to keep our masks on as a safe and best practice, and do our best to be clear so that everyone online and here in the room can understand us. We're going to start this evening with a budget presentation. Mr. Whittemore.
I just want to say a quick note. I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Whittemore for many years now, and I've spent a great deal of time with him and his thoughtful approach to our budgeting practices here at Queensbury. And I feel very fortunate to have him as a partner. Just this afternoon when I was sitting with him, going through things one more time, just his in-depth analysis of our district has been exquisite, and I wanted to thank him publicly for being able to shift gears as we find out new information. So thank you, Mr. Whittemore.
Thank you. I appreciate those kind words. We're very close to the end of the budget, and some very significant changes have occurred in terms of federal money expected to come to the district. It's not often when we talk about school district finances that you get an opportunity to really be happy and be excited and have a lot of optimism in terms of what's going to happen in terms of our district. And the action taken by the federal government, in particular how they're distributing aid based on the Title I enrollment, our relative enrollment within Title I populations, has really benefited the school district. But it's been a very long trip for us in terms of where we were going to be financially. So in September of this school year, as we were all facing children returning to the classroom, how are they going to fit in the classroom? How are we going to be able to fit on buses? How are we able to provide the proper PPE and disinfectant? We were also looking at unprecedented state aid cuts. Now, the state has been through state aid cuts before, nothing like this though. And we were faced when we were putting last year's budget together and going into the school year, a $4 million state aid reduction. That's when the governor was talking about 20% state aid cuts. For Queensbury, we were looking at about $4 million. And that would have been catastrophic for the school district. And during that time, we had fantastic leadership from Mr. Mannix and Mr. Weaver and the rest of the Board of Education, supporting the program and giving us the sort of the light to follow in terms of maintaining the budget that would support the program looking forward. Then in January, after the presidential election and some of the other elections, we began to hear better news. We heard the state comptroller put out information about state income receipts, and they were better than expected. We heard talk of stimulus packages on top of the CARES Act that we had already received. So things seem to be trending better. And there, where we are now is this stimulus package has passed. Operationally, for the school district, it's very, very significant. Where we were staring at a $4 million decrease in our state aid, we're expecting a $3.9 million increase of federal money. So that's outside of any sort of state aid conversations. What we're hearing from the state is the state has received very, very similar increases in aid from the federal government. So earmarked money for schools, earmarked money for states in their operation, dramatically improve our ability to continue to offer the program here in Queensbury. Now, to a certain extent, this wasn't unexpected. We had a lot of what we talked about in terms of our planning was what happened in years past. We looked back at our own financial statements. We looked at the last crisis that we had been through, nothing like this, but we looked at what happened during that time. We looked at what happened to the school district in terms of the cost of instructional staff, where were changes made there, fund balance management, what changes happened there, what were some of the outcomes, and then also changes to the tax levy during that time. And there were a lot of lessons within that from that 09-010 period that we tried to learn and carry forward with the leadership here. So a couple recommendations that are significant to this budget. We know that $3.9 million of federal aid is coming. We've seen the number on the spreadsheet. That number is going to pass through the state of New York. So the state of New York will act as the pass-through entity to distribute to the school. The timing of that really matters. How it can be spent really matters. We know that there have been significant costs for PPE, retention of staff, more expensive to come as students come back, and there's a learning gap in the fall. But we don't have the details yet on this money, but we know it's coming, it's significant, and we pivoted it, as Mr. Gannon has said. Now it's time for us to look at our community and say, we need to plan around this money, and we no longer need to seek to override in terms of what we do for our long-term financial growth. So that would be the recommendation from the district to the Board of Education, to put forward a budget that doesn't have the override component in it. We also, this money is significant to our school district, whether it comes in 1 year or across 2 or 3 years, is still significant to how we draft budgets. And we'd like to recommend to the Board of Education to have a lower tax levy growth. We were planning on going out at 2.5%. That levy growth was needed for the expected growth in instructional costs. Now we have a significant federal aid coming in, again without details, but we do expect it to come in that decreases the amount we need to levy and ask of our local community. One item that we had done in terms of our planning with what we were asking for with supermajority is we went out for less buses than we normally do. Buses are heavily aided. We get about 71% of aid back on the bus, so the state basically pays for all the bus. We were going to go out at 3, which would put us off cycle. We would like to recommend to the board to keep that cycle of 4 buses. It's actually cheaper for us to buy that new bus versus keep the old bus and invest in heavy engine repairs and such. So very simply, just a little bit of history to talk about. The bars represent budget voter approval. The community has overwhelmingly, the last over 10 years, supported the budget. We're very grateful of that. Very respectful of the community's contribution, what it would do for the education of our students. We're anticipating similar support this year. One lesson to briefly talk on it, at the end of the 09-010 fiscal crisis, there were some low tax levy increases because of heavy reserves and heavy fund balance the district had at that time. We are not in that position now, so we would recommend still the 2% levy growth for the school district for some of the long-term expenses the district does have and faces. This $3.9 million is significant, but it's a one-time. It's a one-time stimulus for the school district itself, but it's not a reoccurring revenue stream. So to get into the numbers, we have spent a lot of time with these numbers in some detail. The board has detail that I can add and answer questions on when they have it, but it's mostly the same as last year. Generally, we think the instructional staff will be the same, the people in the administrative staff should be the same. Some changes around the capital, but mostly that's related to debt. So administrative going down a little bit from 4.9 to 4.8. Program, similar. That change is essentially related to staff that is here as they progress through the salary schedules. The capital component, I'll explain a little more detail in a second, and then the benefits as well. Health insurance by itself, an increase of about $400,000. So in terms of what's happening with the debt, we're transitioning from, in this building we're in now, the work that was done from long-term debt to short-term debt. We're going from bonds to bands, and you see that reflected. But we have to map out our debt structure. Next year is not as important, but the other years are important. So we have to get not just next year lined up, but the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, so the district can continue to keep up with its capital needs as the Board of Education grows. And the transfer of capital we talked about a couple of times. We're recommending Board of Education addressing the roof issues at the middle school. Revenues, sometimes this is about presentation. And when we put together last year's budget, we were staring down the face of that 20% aid reduction. 20% was about $4 million. We were pretty optimistic that it wasn't going to really be that. So we kind of cut that number in half and dropped aid by 10% or $2 million. So it looks like a large state aid growth, but it's really pretty flat. We had made a significant adjustment downward based on the rhetoric coming out of the executive branch, looking at this really critical drops in state aid. The levy is the levy. We changed it. That's a real number, so we've changed it to represent 2% growth the next year. Other things like pilots and some other sort of miscellaneous things. Appropriated fund balance is mostly a budgeting tool, but what I would say for next year, we are planning to replace the roof with surplus monies from the year before. So some of that budgeted appropriated fund balance will actually be used in replacement of that capital cost. So the increase in the budget, I will just note very quickly that we do have to run through the final amortization schedule for Tim's firm, but generally this is the budget we're holding, and we'll send out any changes to that line in the budget if it does change. So a couple action items. Tonight we would recommend to the board re-adopt the notice, so it can go out on the paper. I believe April 1st is the deadline, it needs to go into the paper. We have removed the supermajority language, so that's not there anymore. And then we changed the number of buses from 3 to 4. So on the 12th, we'll present this one last time with a little more depth and sort of these summary numbers. I know the board has more detail, but that budget will represent a 2% tax levy increase, and we'll have those final debt numbers. I know it'll change a little bit between today and the 12th. So, are there any questions or anything I can answer?
Any questions from any of the board members?
Thank you very much.
Scott, thank you. That is good news. Thank you very much. So the next portion of the meeting, we are going to have open forum. It does provide an opportunity to address the Board of Education. We ask participants who wish to speak during open forum to type their full name in the chat box, and when called upon, to identify themselves verbally and, if applicable, the organization they are representing so that they may be recognized. For clarity, we ask that all speakers identify the school-related matter or topic to be discussed. In order to conduct district business in a smooth, orderly, and timely manner, open forum is limited to a maximum of 30 minutes, with 3 minutes allocated to each speaker. And as always, we do appreciate public attendance and participation in the meetings. And just before we begin, just so clarify, it was called to my attention and it was my error. The open forum is to discuss matters with the board. It is not for interaction and a question and answer session with the board. If there is questions, or if there are questions, excuse me, on topics that are being addressed this evening, then we'll certainly note that and have the appropriate administrator or staff member get back to that person. But again, we want to give as many people a chance to speak that want to speak, but again, it's my error. There's really not proper decorum to be answering questions, even though sometimes we've done it in the past. But I think going forward, it's something we need to be a little more mindful of, and I certainly will. So with that, Mr. Luthringer, do we have someone signed up for open forum?
We do not. Not at this time.
Okay. No one signed up, then, okay. Close open forum. And we'll get to the business item at hand. Mr. Whittemore?
Recommended the board approve business item A related to the budget notice as presented, and I will note that this is a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Whittemore. Can I have a motion for business item A, please?
So moved, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kathy. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to the roll call
Trustee Belvin? Trustee Belvin, Pat, are you on? Trustee Cabana?
Aye.
Trustee Flaherty?
Aye.
Trustee Holzer?
Aye.
Trustee Mannix?
vote. Aye.
Trustee Malloy?
Aye.
Trustee Shea?
Aye.
Trustee Weaver?
Aye.
I just want to come back to Trustee Belvin. Pat, are you on the call? Can you hear us?
She's unmuted.
I think she was having an issue with the volume or mic on her end.
Motion passes. The motion passes, so we can move on if that's okay. Thank you, Pat. I'm sorry it wasn't working. Move on. Thank you for that, Mr. Whittemore. Board committee reports. Anybody? Me? Okay. And any member comments? So I just have the one comment. Earlier today and this afternoon, the board was made aware of a member of the board that's submitted their resignation because they're leaving town for warmer climates. Ms. Malloy, thank you very much. She's gonna finish her term through the end of June, but she'll be relocating. So we certainly appreciate your years of service, and as I said in my comments to you, you always brought a lot of outside experience and thoughtfulness and education to our discussion. So I know you'll be missed very much in our conversations. I wish you and your husband the best, your family the best in your move. There's some informational items there. I guess they don't bear repeating. Spring break's coming up. Just want to make sure everyone please be mindful of the COVID issues, even though we're starting to get lax and numbers are going down. It's still requires some social distancing and some wearing your masks so that we don't get any more spread or any kind of jump in numbers. Nothing else to come before the board. We do have need for executive session. So I need a motion to enter executive session to discuss employment of particular individuals related to tenure review. Have a motion, please? Oh, I need the other one also? No. Yeah. And also, well, we're going to executive session. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy. Second? Thank you, Stacy. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I believe there is a separate sign-in for the executive session for the board, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks at the next board meeting. Enjoy your April break, and everyone be safe. Thank you.